Hello, hello. My name is Dustin Kirkland. I'm honored to join you here today to speak a little bit about a passion of mine, something I've been working on for quite some time. I'm the author and developer of an open source project that's part of Ubuntu called Biobu, and I'm here to talk about that today. Um, just out of curiosity, who's never heard or never used Biobu before? Ah, good. I love this. This is going to be fun. Excellent. So, I'll give just a brief background. Almost 10 years ago, this was in 2008, so 9 years ago, at the Ubuntu Developer Summit that we held at Google. This was the summit where we were planning the Ubuntu Jaunty release. So this was 904. I was sitting at lunch with a couple of friends, and we were talking about our screen RC file, the configuration file for screen. Screen is a utility in the command line that lots of Unix sysadmins have used for almost 30 years now. What screen allows you to do is run commands and then detach from your screen and come back later. It's all command line. It's really old, but it's really cool. And in fact, with screen, there's a lot you can do with it. There's a huge man page that goes on for days about all of the different configuration options and hotkeys. In fact, this is the first page of the man page, and you can see that you're looking at literally less than 3% of the entire manual. It's super complicated. It's well documented, but for someone to really understand screen takes quite a bit of investment. It takes a lot of time to understand it. So essentially, what we set out to do, myself and a couple of other Ubuntu developers, was to create a more elegant screen. So the word byobu is actually a Japanese word. I'm sure you've seen these before. There are these beautiful folding screens. You'll find them in Korea, in Japan. They're very artistic, they're elegant, they're well done. Screen itself is perfectly functional. A byobu is a more elegant version of screen, in fact. And so what we were trying to do, what we set out to do, was to democratize your screen RC. For a system administrator who understood that man page and read that man page, many of you in the room might have done that at one time or another. What we found around that lunch table, all of us had customized our screen RC. We'd put a number of different hacks and tips and tricks, and we started sharing the different configuration options that each of us had in our own configuration file, and we all kind of complained to one another how, yeah, isn't it a pain when we set up a new server? This was right at the beginning of sort of Amazon web servers. Every time we set up a new web server, we would need to copy our screen configuration from one place to another. And so what we kind of discussed is, what if Ubuntu just shipped a really nice set of profile screen configurations so that everyone could take advantage of some of the advanced features of screen and do that very conveniently. Well, it was a little more controversial than that, right? We could just ship a particular screen RC file and put it into the etc. configuration for screen itself. But something like screen that people have been using for 25 or 30 years in this case, you really don't want to mess with some people's configuration that's near and dear to their heart. So what we did was, instead, we created a whole new project, just an open source project that wrapped screen. Now, we set out with these 5 goals. Screen is connected. It's usually for a connected type environment. It's connected to you, but also connected often to others. We use screen to do pair programming around the world, right? I live in Texas, but I'm often working with people in France or the UK or in Japan. We can all connect to the same system. Anything that I type can be seen by someone else. This isn't a screen share like a Skype or like a Google Hangout or a WebEx. This is actually the same text interface that everyone is connected into. We also set out to make it consistent. Taking one configuration file and moving it around to a bunch of different places should have a very consistent feel. We also wanted a bit more convenience in a command line environment, where people such as myself, developers, DevOps, system administrators, we spend a lot of time in a command line environment, and having something that's convenient, uses hotkeys. If you're familiar with Emacs or Vim, once you learn those hotkeys, you can be extremely effective within those environments, right? Why can't we have that just for a command line environment as well? So that was another goal. The comfort factor, comfortable, is to me just really part of being Ubuntu. I've been involved with Ubuntu since 2006. Everything about Ubuntu to me should feel comfortable. That's what makes Ubuntu to me, is the comfort factor. And then lastly, communicative. If you're just sitting at a command prompt and this is all you see, $ blank, go, that's not very communicative. There's so much more information that can be and should be conveniently communicated to a user from a command line. Sometimes that's status information. Other times that's exit codes or what's happened previously or in the past in that command line environment. So those are the design goals. I think it's important whenever creating an open source project, I've created many open source projects, to set out with some design goals and ensure that the problem you're solving is a new and unique problem. Now, so far, I've used the word screen quite a bit. That's a GNU project, GNU Screen. A couple of years into it, in about 2011, Byobu actually grew the ability to use tmux as well as screen. And a couple of years later, actually, tmux became the default backend. So screen is supported from a legacy mode, but most of what I'm going to show and talk about today is actually using tmux. Tmux is effectively a modern version of screen. tmux was created in about 2009, a year or two after Byobu was created. But now Byobu is a wrapper in front of either tmux or screen. And in its early days, what Byobu did was it made it very easy for users to move from screen to tmux. You can kind of think of these two as, like GNOME and KDE. It's two different ways of creating that command line environment, where Byobu ships a series of configuration files and key bindings that wrap both of those. So at this point, I'm going to try to dive into a live demo. Holding the microphone is going to be a little bit of a challenge here, but I'm going to do my best. Let's see. Is that still recording, you think? All right. Okay, so there's a bunch of different things that we can look at. Launch, status, create, rename, split. I may have to refer back to this to remember some of what we're going to do. Sorry, I opened too many of these. All right, we're going to start from a command prompt. So if I just start in a terminal, I'll blow that up a little bit, and I just type the word Byobu. There's some of the screen that's missing here. I'm gonna have to zoom out just a little bit to get it all in. Okay, I'm in a Byobu terminal at this point. I can actually install the app and use the icon. This is the icon right here. But if I just launch from a terminal, if I SSH into a machine and I'm in a command line environment and I type that, I'm now in a Byobu session. There's a couple of things that are different to start with. And I'll start with the command prompt, and then I'll move down to the status indicators at the bottom. From the command prompt, it's actually color-coded. There's 3 different colors in there. We tried to use the Ubuntu themes by default, but other distros have taken this and applied their own coloring themes. So we tried to use the Ubuntu gray, the Ubuntu orange, and the Ubuntu purple. And the first part of that prompt is exactly the same as you would find in Ubuntu or Debian, where your current directory is reflected right here. I think it might actually be easier if I invert the colors and make it light on dark. like that. Is that a little easier to see? Yeah, okay, we're going to do that. Now, one important thing that's different is we actually show the exit code of your previous command if your previous command exited non-zero. That's super important because normally when programs run and run successfully, like running the command true, the exit code is 0, right? But if a command fails, if you're grepping for a string, or if you've run a command like, I don't know, rsync or wget, or you've tried to ping something and it fails, you get a non-zero exit code. I can run the command false, and what you'll actually see is the exit code is shown at the beginning of the line. That's super important if you think if you think the previous command succeeded, but in fact it didn't, and maybe exited silently. Some programs are not very good at showing you that their exit was actually unsuccessful. And this is just enough to show you that, and you can see that code. Anytime it's a non-zero exit code, the Byobu prompt will show you what the exit code was. If it's 0, it's just eliminated. It's assumed, most of the time things are working as is. But sometimes it's important to know that git commit failed, or anything that you might have done actually failed. I'm running in full screen mode right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this just to make sure that we can see this bottom line. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit to get a little bit more of it on the screen here. I'm sorry the resolution isn't as good as it could be. Okay, so this bottom line is the other thing that's different. Normally, when you're just in a command terminal without Byobu or Screen or Tmux, you're at the top of the screen and you work your way down the screen. That communicative, the ability to communicate and the importance of communicating to a user is actually reflected in this line. This entire line is a dynamically updated set of status codes, status information about the system. First of all, I can see this is an Ubuntu system, and it's 1604. Tmux runs on essentially every Linux and even Mac at this point. If you've got a bunch of tabs open, like tabs in a browser, but tabs in your terminal, and you've SSH'd into a couple of different machines, different systems, and maybe one's a Fedora, one's a Debian, one's a Mac, you could actually see very easily what environment you're in, because the commands that you're going to use there are actually going to be different. This next thing in white is our window, and we can actually create multiple windows inside of Byobu. So I'm going to create 3 windows. So now I have windows 0, 1, and 2, and I can run different programs in different windows. So in this one, I'm going to run top. In the other one, I'm going to run htop, which are 2 different programs that show me status about my system. So here I can see all of the different processes that are running on my machine right now, and that's running and is constantly running. But I can also see that other program that I launched, which is a different version of the same program, is also running right now. I can do this as many times as I want. I can create dozens or hundreds of different windows, and that's super useful because I may want to run multiple things at the same time and keep them running even when I'm not looking at them, right? So these are the windows. I'm going to show a little bit about how to create those windows and navigate. I'll get to the hotkeys in a second, but I'll just run down, just give some examples of some of the different status indicators. Off to the far right, it's just cut off as a clock. So there's a ticking clock all the way down to the number of seconds, which I have in the top right-hand corner, which is from the desktop. But here I actually have the clock coming from the server. So here I'm running on my local machine, but if I were running actually on a different machine, I could see the time in that location with time zone indicated. But more importantly, have you ever been connected to a system and you think you're connected, but the Wi-Fi drops or something like that, right? As long as that number is ticking, your connection is live. So it's actually a nice little heartbeat that keeps your connection alive. And when something goes wrong, you'll see that clock has stopped, and then you'll know, oh man, I must have lost network connectivity. So that's an important thing to communicate. The date is there as well. The IP address of the machine that you're connected to, the user and host, which is also shown in the prompt, right? You can see that in the prompt. But in this case, we're running a program full screen, so we don't have it in the prompt. Sometimes it's useful to have the machine and username down here. In purple is the disk usage. So I've got 36 gigs of disk space that's 90% used, right? Sometimes it's important to know that your disk is getting full, and being able to see that easily, constantly, especially if you're running a program that's consuming a lot of disk space. You can see that here. In green is memory, same thing. So there's 15.4 gigs of memory, 40% used. So I'm not very heavily using my memory right now, but if I were doing a video transcode or something like that, I could really burn through the memory. And if I got close to the limit, I might actually run my system out of memory. This is the CPU, and you can see the CPU frequency. It's actually bouncing around a little bit. 2.9, 3.0 gigahertz, 3.1, 3.2. This is my laptop. It's an Intel laptop with frequency scaling. So as the machine gets busy, the CPU will run faster. As the machine is less busy, the CPU will run slower and save power. In yellow is the system load. System load is just kind of a way in Linux and Unix systems that we determine how busy a machine is. This load is almost zero. It's 0.02, which means that this machine is not very busy. I have 4 processors in the system, which is 4x right here, so 4 times 3.1 gigahertz. I know I have 4 processors. If this machine were fully loaded, completely busy, this load would be actually 4. But right now it's 0.01. So this machine isn't very busy right now. There's a number of other things here. This is my wireless connectivity, my battery percentage, because this is a laptop. I wouldn't see this in a server, but in a laptop I can see there's 44% battery left, and it's discharging. There's a minus sign. If it were charging, if I plugged it in, there would be a plus sign immediately. The CPU temperature is 42°C. The machine's been up for 12 hours. Importantly, in red, I have 34 security updates that I need to apply to this machine. This is usually the first thing I look at when I SSH into a remote system. How many updates do I need to apply? And then just as a security geek, this is how much entropy my machine has. So it's an entropy counter. That's actually just a small number of indicators that I can turn on or off. So if I come into the configuration menu for Byobu, I can see that there's a bunch of different. I can see all the ones that I have enabled, the date and the disk usage. I can see things that I have not enabled actually, like the fan speed on my CPU, or whether I have email. There's an indicator for that. So there's a bunch of things that you could turn on or off. For instance, if I want to turn off the uptime is this little status widget right here. If I turn that off, we can see that one will go away in just a second. So I'll do that. I'll click apply, and it goes away at that point. So that's the communicative part, the status indicators aspect of Byobu, and I would say the entry to the interface. Okay, I'll go into some of the hotkeys and how I can configure my windows. But are there any questions about the indicators before I move on from the indicators? Yes. How easy is it to create a new one? That's a great question. It's actually really easy. If you can create a shell script or any script that outputs a little bit of text, you can actually put that text. Text in here very easily. So as an example, first of all, there is an indicator called custom. This one I have highlighted right here. If I enable custom and apply that, and then if I go into my Byobu directory and go into bin, and I open a file, I make that executable, so what I've done here is I put a number, which is 10. That's how often this should run. And I said this should run every 10 seconds. Some things you might want to run more frequently, and some things you might not want to run very frequently. I just picked 10 as an example here. But right now, every 10 seconds, that program I created, one-line program, which says echo bonjour, is running. And when it runs, it now shows up right here. So obviously that's a silly print screen, but if you had your own script that you wanted to, check how far along your download is or how much disk space is being used in your home directory, you'd write that script and just output it right there. Okay, good.
When you say SSH to a server, you have to run it Biobu there or just the local one?
That's a good question. So this is kind of fun. So I'm going to now detach from Biobu, right? So I'm going to kill that entire session. It's gone away, right? But if I come back into it, everything that I was running before is still running in the background. So that's great. You can actually set Biobu to run automatically at launch, which is exactly how I set my systems up. And what you run is Biobu. Sorry, let me clear the screen. You actually just run Biobu enable. And if you run that, that means that every time you SSH into the system, it'll automatically run. And if you want to turn it off, you can do that. So as an example now, I'm going to, hopefully I have enough bandwidth here, but I'm going to SSH into a system at home. And I can see whatever I was doing last on that machine. So I've been detached from this machine for some amount of time. I left that in Texas back home, but the last time I was working on that machine, I was doing something with the NVIDIA GPUs on it. Yes?
Is there any advantage to when I install the app using the actual app and launching after it's installed, or integrating it more with the terminal that's already?
It's really the same thing.
Okay.
It's really the same thing whether you click on the icon over here.
Sure. Nothing different happens there versus if I just integrate it with. Okay.
That's right. That's absolutely right. So next, I want to show a couple of the hotkeys, a couple of the keys that I use to manipulate this. I'm going to put the mic down here for just a second, and I'm going to start by hitting Shift F1. See if I can make that a little bit bigger. So there's actually a help screen built into Biobu itself. So if you only remember one thing, remember Shift F1, and that will bring up this help screen. If you start there, you can figure everything out. And in fact, sometimes I forget and I have to go and look things up myself. But for the most part, the F2 key is used to create things. You can create 3 different things, basically. You can create windows, you can create splits, and you can create sessions. Okay? The first thing I did was create a window. Creating a window means making a whole new full screen, basically shell. You get a whole new shell that's as big as the screen is. Okay? Now, I do that sometimes, but what I do far more frequently than that is I split this screen horizontally and vertically. Now, if I hold down Control when I press F2, or I hold down Shift when I press F2, I can create horizontal and vertical splits, like this. Control F2, split it vertically. Shift F2, split it horizontally. I now have 3 different windows, effectively, 3 different shells within the same screen. And as a developer, this is great. This means I can look at source code over here, I can run the code right here, I can compile the code right here, and I've got access to all of that information. I can fill my screen up with good information. I can also detach from it and come back in and look at it later. I can leave a long-running job, something that might take days or weeks to run, running in one of these splits, detach, come back, check on it, detach, come back, check on it. So as an example, I'll do just that. So we'll come over to this one, and we'll look at some source code. So now we have the source code, and I don't have a lot of room, so I can actually resize this split a little bit. I could perhaps watch some processes in this one, and I typically run with a lot more information on my screen. I'm just trying to make it big so that we can see it in this room. And then down here I could start an apt update in the background. Like that. Now if I detach and I come back in, all of that information is still running in the background. And that's super important when you're talking about remote servers, right? There's a lot that we can do with these splits. You saw me resize them. I can also move them around. So I can move this one over here. I can zoom into that split and make it full screen and then put it back where it was. All of this is explained on the help screen. So just looking at what we did, we pressed Shift F1 to look at the help. We pressed F2 to create a window, Shift F2 and Control F2 to create new splits. And the one that I didn't do yet is Control Shift F2, which creates a whole new session. A session is a collection of windows and splits. Sometimes it's nice to have multiple sessions, mainly when there are more than one person using the same account on the system. What's really cool is that we often use this, like I said, for pair programming, where two different people are using the same terminal at the same time. Time check. Is this a 30-minute session, or do I have a little bit more time? Anyone know? Well, no one's running me off the stage yet.
Go for it.
Okay. 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 So there's quite a bit more we can do with the demo, and I'm happy to keep doing that. But I wanted to show you just some of the fun little Easter eggs that I've put into Byobu over time. In that for me it is a command line environment, but it ends up being kind of a harness for doing some fun things on the command line itself. So for the first one that I find actually really useful, especially when I'm on a plane and I'm trying to use the Wi-Fi on the plane and things are dropping and breaking, I've created a program called Wi-Fi Status in Ubuntu, which actually uses Byobu. So I'll demonstrate that right here by typing Wi-Fi Status. And when I type Wi-Fi Status, I use Byobu to split the screen 6 ways, and I can see the IWconfig information and the IFconfig information. I can see my routing information. I can see the kernel dmessage logs on any authentication that's taking place. And then I can see I'm trying to ping the local router, and I'm trying to ping out to the internet. And sometimes when I'm trying to debug what's going, I have 10 minutes? Perfect. Thank you so much. So this is often useful when I'm trying to debug a network, a flaky network. The Wi-Fi here today has been fantastic for me. I don't know about anyone else, but kudos to the network team who's working the conference. They've done a fantastic job with it. So that's Wi-Fi Status. I use that one all the time. The next one that's kind of fun is something called Hollywood. So if you've ever watched one of those Hollywood hacker movies, and I'm gonna zoom out a little bit here. So I'm just gonna type Hollywood, and we're gonna see the screen just get really busy as we break into Fort Knox here. So this is kind of fun. This is all just a bunch of random programs in Ubuntu itself. That's getting a little obnoxious now, but this is just supposed to make your screen look like you're doing something super busy and fun. What's kind of neat about this is actually last year it appeared on an NBC News report. You can actually play and watch this. It's like a 60-second piece about malware, where they interviewed some Romanian hackers about how they were creating ransomware. And on the background of the screen, they were literally running Hollywood, which is a total joke. But the NBC News reporter thought it was totally serious, and so this is hilarious. If you want to see this afterward, we can play this one afterward. So that was fun, and I thought that was kind of cool. What I thought was even more fun, I'm a big Saturday Night Live fan, and there was a skit in Saturday Night Live last year where Hollywood was actually running in the background of Saturday Night Live. And I thought that was much more appropriate in that this program was meant to be a farce anyway, and being used in a comedy sketch was much more appropriate. And I thought that was a lot of fun. This is a sketch that was making fun of Mr. Robot, which is another favorite TV show of mine. So the other thing we can do is another program called Wall Street, something I created that pays homage to the Bloomberg terminal. I spend a lot of time for work on Wall Street, and everyone's computer on Wall Street looks kind of like that Mission Impossible look, but it's actually really useful information. There's stocks here, and there's tickers going across there. These are news articles. Just as soon as things are hitting the news article, hitting the wire, it shows up on this terminal, and stock traders use this to steal pennies from you and I, probably. So I created a program called Wall Street. So if I type Wall Street here, we'll see the terminal here get split up. This one looks a lot better when on a dark screen than on a light screen, but these are real stocks, real stock prices. This gets updated every couple of minutes, probably not today since it's Saturday. These are real news articles. You can, if I zoomed in a little bit, we could see real news articles happening here, different articles here, and some visualization of that data. In no way does this replace Bloomberg Terminal, which costs like $50,000 per monitor or something insane. This is really just meant to be sort of a joke or an homage to that. And then finally, one of my favorite artists is Piet Mondrian. And so there's a fun little hidden key inside of Byobu. Let's see if I can remember it. I think it's Control-Shift-Alt-F12. No. There we go. And basically, every time you press that, it will split the screen up and try to paint what looks like sort of a Piet Mondrian painting, something like that, which to me looks a little bit like a terminal, a command terminal. So I hope that was a little bit of fun. It's actually it's a useful tool as well, but it's a tool that has kind of a fun side or a silly side as well. Byobu.org is the upstream open source website. On that, there's a tutorial. You can watch it for 5 or 10 minutes long, and it will show you in much more detail what it is that how to follow along and use those hotkeys. Any questions? I think we got a minute or two. Yes, sir.
If I install Byobu in my laptop, do I have Hollywood?
No, but if you install Hollywood, you have Hollywood. Apt install Hollywood. We'll get Hollywood. Yeah. That's the key takeaway today is Hollywood, right? Yes, sir.
Where is the configuration saved? Because when you say when I go back, if I quit Byobu running, if I don't come back, I still have the same configuration. So where is it saved?
So that's just running in memory. It's not stored on disk. As long as that machine is running, it's running in memory. If you turn the machine off, or if it gets turned off, you'll lose that current setup. It's not like your browser that is able to resume those tabs. Browser is able to do that because the backend data is persistent. What's running in a Byobu session isn't persistent like that.
How you treat Hollywood? That you want Hollywood, you make a big selfie with it, and then you want to work back to work. So how do you locate it?
Yeah, so the source code is just a little bit of shell source code. I'll pull that up just briefly here. But basically, there's a widget dir. So each of those 10 little splits I call a widget. And if we're not in a tmux environment, we create one. So we launch Byobu if we're not in one. Otherwise, we use the one that exists. We create a new session, and then we send a series of keys. So we attach that session. And then basically what we do is in a loop, we loop over all of the widgets in that widget dir. And then we create a new split. So tmux split window is the command to do what I was doing with those F keys. You know, the control F2 splits the window. You can actually, it's actually programmatic. So I'm saying split the window. Give it a split the window whose name is hollywood.pane. I run all of those widgets with a nice value of -19 or with 19, which means that they get very low priority. If your machine's busy, you know, doing other things, the busy things are what's important. The Hollywood stuff is not important. So I run it very nicely because some of them can consume a lot of CPU. And so we do that, and we sleep for a bit of time. I found that there are some race conditions if this quits too quickly. We increment the number of splits. If we get to the end, we break. Otherwise, we come back in that loop, and we create another one. So we do that 10 or 20 times, however many times. And then afterward, we randomize the layout of those splits. So if we'll look at it one more time. Oh, Control C should quit. Yeah, so I just Control C maybe a couple of times, but that should do it. I'm out of time, but I'm happy to take more questions in the hall here, if you like. I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.